Hey everyone, this is Pseudo. This is another topic I've kind of been putting off doing a video on, and that is down skills and how they're balanced in this game, or the lack thereof rather. So it's something I've wanted to talk about for a while because I think it's really interesting, because it's something that happens a lot, supposedly to other people. I've actually never gone to downstate myself in the game before, but I hear this is pretty important and pretty common to all game modes. So let's look at it, shall we? So when you go to 0 health in this game, when you're normally in the upright state, if you will, you get this set of down skills. And it looks different on every different profession, but some of them are definitely more well-known than others. If you go into downstate in water, you actually get different skills, but that's an entirely different discussion altogether. I actually didn't know that there were different skills per profession, because I've really only played Mesmer and Warrior, and again, I've never gone down before in my life, so there's that. But anyway, let's look at the balance of these skills, right? So when talking about this, I wanted to first sort of think about, should a class's power level be balanced around how good their downstate is? Well, no. Thus, conversely, a class's downstate shouldn't be balanced around how good the class itself is, because you wouldn't want to actively have to go into downstate to do part of your damage rotation, or to take advantage of some kind of like extra burst damage, like maybe think the old Ellie lava font trait in PvP, unless your class was actively built for that, right? Like think maybe there was an entire trait line in Necromancer or something that revolved around Necromancer going into downstate and then getting a whole new slew of skills or abilities, right? So what is the purpose of a downstate? Well, it's twofold. A, it's to revive yourself, or B, it's to try to get a kill on a veteran, usually, or higher level mob or enemy, to rally yourself, right? Or maybe in a group scenario to prolong your death long enough so that an ally can come over and res you, whether it's with a skill or coming over and pressing F to pay respects on you and rub you to life again. So let's look at these downstate skills and sort of determine what's good, what's not, and maybe rank them from worst to best. I'm actually going to spoil, just so everyone doesn't have to skip ahead, and just skip to the end of this sort of discussion and spoil what the best is right now. It's Ranger. There's no competition. It's Ranger. Ranger downstate skills are insane, mostly because they have this lick wounds ability. Their Thunderclap ability also isn't anything to scoff at. It's an AoE daze that's 900 range. It also isn't a projectile, so it doesn't have to worry about like the warrior hammer going into space when you throw it, or being blocked by a projectile block. The other reason that Ranger is far and away has the best downstate is they can actually still use their pet. Their pet stays active when they go into downstate, so the pet is by default auto-attacking the target. They can also use the pet abilities, even though the pet UI actually disappears. If you didn't know this, and you've ever been fighting a ranger trying to stomp them and you wonder why that wolf just feared you, or the smoke scale just cast its AoE smoke field even though it doesn't blind anymore on you, that's why, because they can still actually not only use the pet's abilities, but they can also swap pets and use the other pet's ability while in downstate, even though the UI again has disappeared. This is insane. The Lick Wounds ability also reses at an incredible rate, even faster than the Guardian downstate Symbol of Judgment, which does not last as long. And then if you swap pets again, you can just Lick Wounds again if the skill is off cooldown, so that the other pet comes over and reses you. It's just insane, right? It has so many tools, and you compare that to something like Engineer, which just basically has 2 very mediocre CCs on it. One is a pull, meant to pull you into the other one, and the other one is a push meant to knock you away. So the idea is if you have both up, you can pull them into the trap and then they'll get knocked away, and maybe you can bandage yourself, which never happens fast enough to res. So let's rank these from worst to best, and then sort of discuss how this could maybe be modified in 2023, and how arenanet might want to balance this state of the game going forward. All right, so getting into it, let's just go from worst to best. And this is, again, my list. I don't play all the classes equally. I far and away play Mesmer more than anything else, and these days I play Warrior more than anything else, but I do have experience on all the classes, so again, your list may vary, and your mileage may vary compared to mine. But Far and away, I think the worst is Engineer. With these three abilities, you throw junk, you get a random condition. Chill used to be pretty good. Weakness is pretty good to avoid them something just cleaving you out, whether it's a veteran mob or a enemy player. Kind of mediocre. Grappling line, throw out a grappling line to pull you to your foe. Not bad, it's a CC, but again, it just pulls something closer to might cleave you or stomp you, and then you have to have booby trap even up to try to blast them away and launch them away from you. So really, if you go into Downstate as an engineer, you're pretty much dead. The one I want to put slightly above that is Revenant, just because the push on it is a little bit more forceful, I find. Don't unsubscribe. Forceful than the NG push, or a little bit more pragmatic because you get it up earlier. This Shadow Step tooltip is kind of erroneous on it. It used to teleport you just to a random location. Now it just pushes you away. 600 range. The teleport was really cool, but again, maybe overpowered, so arenanet nerfed it, I don't know. The 3 skill's pretty much useless. It does basically 0 damage in every game mode. This really needs to be increased. The other thing on the Revenant's kit that's actually worth noting is the auto attack actually slows you, which previously used to slow the speed at which enemy players would stomp you. Now stomp is not affected by quickness and slow, so this doesn't matter. So again, maybe this could be brought up, I don't know. You'd have to look at every individual class if we wanted to really determine balance going forward. The next one, obviously, lower in the pack is Warrior. I'm astonished that I didn't put Warrior 0. I could have, really, because as a Warrior, most of you players know, if you go into Downstate on Warrior, you're pretty much dead no matter what. You get Throw Rock. It's supposed to do a lot of damage, but it doesn't. That's going to be its big thing. It doesn't do any additional conditions. It's pretty bad. 2 to second knockdown, kind of good. But this projectile, this Hammer Toss 2 ability, usually just goes into space when you use it. It never hits your target, and again, can be projectile blocked. The only saving grace is Vengeance, where you can get up for 15 seconds and try to kill and stomp your opponent, or a mob to rally. If you do this while in Vengeance, you don't have 100% chance to rally, you only have 25. This is affected by the trait Vengeful Return, which no one takes because it competes with Warrior Sprint and is an extremely outdated trait. And also it only heals you to 30% instead of 25. You know, they should probably fix that. Maybe in the next 11 years we'll get a fix for that, who knows. But as a Warrior, if you go into Downstate, you're pretty much dead no matter what, which is kind of here nor there. The only saving grace on it is you can maybe kill your opponent. Next worst up the line, number 4, is Thief. Thief has these wonderful abilities: Trail of Knives, an ambush skill, Shadow Escape, and a Smoke Bomb. Trail of Knives cripples, kind of can prevent mobs from getting to you as you, maybe your friend comes over to try to heal you. Venomous Knife, Stealth Attack. This will make sense in a second. You can teleport, 600 range, targeted, ground targeted, not a bad skill. And then the 3 makes you invisible, and it'll give you access to this ambush skill, Venomous Knife, that does bleeding, poison, etc. Thief of note also has a Downstate trait. Where is it? Hold, please. The reason I wanted to mention these is it's kind of weird that Downstate traits still exist at all in the game, let alone ones you have to spec into, because you really shouldn't be balancing, especially 11 years after the game came out. And again, just my opinion, you really shouldn't be balancing core class balance or trait balance around going into Downstate, right? Like, if you did that, either every class needs a trait that you automatically get when you go into a line, or it equally competes somehow with another trait you could choose. Even the one, you can spec into on Warrior Vengeful Return really doesn't do that, because again, Warrior Sprint is ridiculous, and even if you weren't going to take that crack shot, just making your ranged attacks burn or whatever is better. Even if it was 100, you don't really want to make a Downstate build on Warrior, because what are you going to do? Run the food that doubles your health in Downstate? That's pretty much it. And that'd be like a meme build for World versus World, right? So Serpent's Touch, again, you get this when you go into Deadly Arts. It's automatic, unlike the Warrior one, which is better, but honestly, because it does something else where stealing inflicts poison. Sort of the idea for if you're speccing into the straight line, you're doing Condi damage anyway, so it makes your Downstate skills do Condi damage. Honestly, maybe poison would be too much, but in my opinion, they could just make your attacks poison instead when you're in Downstate, and balance it from there. But that's Thief. Again, doesn't get a lot of love. Here we are. Let's move up the chain. Honestly, astonishingly not at the top of the list, although if we went by its inception skills, it probably would be. Mesmer. Down skills inflict confusion. Not a projectile. Very good. Confusion, high duration, good condition. Decent power scaling as well. Second skill teleports you 360 instead of the 600 you get on Thief, and does have a cast time, but also makes you stealth and creates a clone that your opponent can accidentally stomp if you're in PvP. So again, pretty useful down skill, honestly. Of note also, this is an actual attack, unlike the Thief one. So if you're already stealthed and you use this, it will reveal you. Also, if you have snap to target on, unlike the Thief one, you will teleport to whatever you have targeted, which is extra specially great when you're trying to not teleport to something to get stomped in PvP. So if you play with that, you need to toggle it off. Really wish they would just homogenize them and make them both one way or the other. It's kind of annoying, but again, I play on a controller because I'm a weirdo, so maybe it doesn't affect everybody. Phantasmal Rogue does an unbelievable amount of power damage scaling. It used to do even more, and does bonus backstab damage. If the rogue hits, the recharge of this skill is reduced. This skill is great. Has an 8-second cooldown by default, 900 range, doesn't count as a projectile because it's a summon. You're not going to get this off in a Zerg, but like, you know, what else are you going to get off in a Zerg, right? Really solid downstate, in my opinion. Elementalist, the reason I put this slightly higher than Mesmer is because the auto attack, discharge lightning, not a projectile, 2 stacks of vulnerability, really good for trying to rally off those PvE mobs because you're just basically stacking up more damage on whatever you're hitting. Vapor form, or aka mist form, is the reason I kind of put this above Mesmer, because in World versus World you can actually use this to, unlike the Thief teleport or the Mesmer teleport, you can actually use this to get back into towers if you're downstated, or whatever structure might be near you, through the door, and then you can res up in there. You can also use this to just move away in PvE from whatever's trying to kill you, maybe to a spot that they can't get to right away in res. Grasping Earth immobilizes, again, not a projectile, fairly strong 3 skill, but this vapor form is really why I put this sort of above Mesmer in terms of utility, but they're about equal. So I want to do an honorable mention here, and actually throw in, it doesn't have its own downstate skills, but I want to throw in Mechanist, because Mechanist, while they're in downstate, they have the same skills that NG does, but they also still have the mech. And while the mech doesn't get its own set of sort of unique swapping abilities like Ranger does, it's still active, so it's still punching whatever's trying to stomp you. I actually haven't tested out whether or not mech skills can still be used in downstate like Ranger ones, but if they can, that's insane, and this goes automatically to the second best in the game. So Mechanist gets an honorable mention here as sort of the 9+1 asterisk class that has a downstate that's pretty good. Necromancer, well known, pretty much. Necromancer and Guardian are kind of tied, in my opinion, because I think both are useful and very good for their own reasons. Necromancer, very high damage auto attack, not a projectile. Again, it says it's a channel, but it's really just this pulsing damage, and it also heals you in downstate so you can rally. The second is a Fear. It's 900 range. Again, not a projectile. Very good high CC to get something just away from you, right? Whether it's a PvE mob or a player or whatever, so you can do more damage and probably rally. The 3 skill, Fetid Ground, kind of neither here nor there. Dark Combo Field, doesn't really matter in downstate. Poisons, high damage skill, AoE, so you can probably rally off something in PvE, or maybe even a Zerg if you can cast this, if you have time and you go into downstate and you're not immediately stomped. Really good skill, but really why Necromancer is number 7 in my opinion, is because of this strong pulse heal res. It's so much damage, and you even actually get more damage if you have this Death's Embrace minor where you deal more strike damage while downed. Again, it's one of these that it's in spite where you have to take it, so it's not like warrior where you have to spec into it. The reason I keep coming back to the warrior one is A, I play it so I'm extremely non-biased, and B, I think it's ridiculous, especially in the discipline line, that there's a trait that you have to actively take in order to improve your down skill on warrior, where that should be just baseline and it should have something more interesting in that slot. And I think arenanet knows that and has known that for years, but it really, I mean, this 11 years, man, stuff's gotta get modified at some point. I'd really like to see that going forward. But going back to down skills here, Necromancer has that life leech that can do more damage if you spec into it, etc, 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 spec into the trait line that has that bonus. Guardian is sort of tied with Necromancer in my opinion, and the only reason I put it slightly higher, again, you might, in a 1v1 situation, I think Necromancer probably wins out, but Guardian has these skills. The big one being Symbol of Judgment, which we'll get to in a second. The auto attack, not a projectile, hits 3 targets, kind of like pierces. If you're familiar with it, it's this big beam of light. It's very telegraphed. The 2, extremely good in PvP, and the 2 really gives you that AoE pushback, and even Defiance Bar Break, honestly, if you go down in something like, I don't know, a Fractal or something, to get this Symbol of Judgment off, which is an AoE res, it's a light field. Your allies can come over and press F on you if you get this down, or you can honestly usually res yourself if you get this down. It's a very, very strong AoE heal, and you can even heal up raids if like you have multiple guardians in it and you both get your symbol down to sort of save the raid, right? That's why I put it a little bit higher than Necromancer, but again, in terms of like individual utility in different game modes, they're probably tied. And then Ranger, we sort of spoiled it earlier, but Ranger just has an insane downstate in this game. The auto attack, throw dirt, doesn't even matter, right? You have this AoE daze on a 10-second cooldown, which is pretty low. It's not a projectile. You have this lick wounds thing where the pet will just teleport to you and revive you at this insane rate. This is crazy. 15% of your maximum health every second. And then also, in addition to this, again, if something's trying to stomp you, you can just swap to the other pet, have it use its skills. The UI will be hidden, but who cares? If you know what your buttons do, you know what they do, which is just crazy. So why are we having this discussion? What's the purpose? And maybe how could arenanet, what could they take from this, and where could we go from here? Honestly, in an ideal world, I would like to see arenanet rebalance downstate power levels. Not according to how good the class is just otherwise, because trying to balance them without adding a whole trait line like I mentioned at the start of this is insane, but to sort of make them equivalent to balance out the ability to rally of each class, whether that's by healing yourself or by prolonging your death so that an ally can heal you, although you don't really want to rely on that because then you're balancing for like group play, but more to get that rally or kill, or at least give them the same amount or equivalent amount of utility or different utility in downstate, right? Like maybe there was a class that really shined in downstate, like if you give Elementalist Vapor Form and then gave it something else like, I don't know, an increased res while invulnerable, or maybe something that refreshed Vapor Form if you hit with it, right? I'm just spitballing here. You don't really want to balance this around the actual masteries like Rescue Protocol or Channeled Agony, because again, that's assuming that people have these masteries. Or have a Jade bot, and again, you can't use those in World versus World or PvP, so who cares? I guess most of the game mode, because the game isn't really balanced around those game modes anyway. But again, getting back to why they should really rebalance this is something that affects everybody. This downstate. If you've played the game and made it past level 5, I believe, you've experienced this, and it's very frustrating if you're on something like that's at the bottom of the pack, like an engineer or a warrior or a thief, or especially, NG or revenant, where you just have basically 0 tools to rally, even against like a basic veteran mob, right? You have to rely on your gear. You can't really have, lick wounds to have your pet come over and save you. And the second reason I really want to talk about this is they absolutely need to do away with traits that affect your downstate. unless there's going to be, like I said, some kind of bonus effect to the traits. Again, if we go into like Leech Life, right, and go to Death's Embrace, this has a bonus effect, right? And you have to take this trait when you go into Spite. This is a relic of the game, you know, when this used to do way more damage in Downstate. They sort of rolled a lot of that in base, and left a little bit in the Spite trait for reasons. But similar to how fall damage traits, if they're not going to be in the game, I really feel like Downstate traits, especially ones you have to spec into, again, the warrior one is gross, right? Like Vengeance, it doesn't make it 100%. I could be wrong about that, so please feel free to correct me in the comments, but I've had several people tell me, I literally never take this trait, so I don't know, that it is 100% if you spec into this, and even if it is, this trait needs to go. It either needs to be baseline on discipline or another trait, or work correctly at the very least, or really just be taken out of the game entirely, because A, warrior sprint, which is the trait that everyone takes in every game mode, is ridiculous and does everything, so you would never ever take this even if it was good, and B, it's not good. So this kind of selectable trait really needs to go away on every class. So I'd like to see arenanet going forward rebalance Downstate to sort of be equivalent across all classes. You know, maybe they could take away the ability of ranger to swap pets in Downstate, and use skills but leave lick wounds, and then bring every other class's Downstate up to the level of ranger, or maybe end up around where like guardian and necromancer, the like level of power and utility they have, those two classes have. That's about where I'd like to see it, honestly. But let me know what you guys think. How should Downstate be rebalanced in the comments? Should it be rebalanced at all? Is there a reason that Ranger, that I haven't thought of, that Ranger has a stronger Downstate than just every other class in the game? Honestly, I just think that this hasn't been touched, and that's really surprising to me, because this is something that affects every player in the game, unless you're a god. Like I said, I've never experienced Downstate, so I really don't know. So, talking from ignorance maybe, but memes aside, let me know in the comments what you think. I'm really glad I got this suggested by a community member, and if you have any other ideas for balance discussions, let me know. This is something that I really do feel passionate about, balance. I think it's important to emphasize that something doesn't need to be balanced or good or fun. In an ideal world, it is all three, but there is definitely a difference. So keep that in mind when talking about balance, and when specifying sort of what context, what game mode you play when talking about balance going forward, or what aspect of balance, rather. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel for more insane balance discussions. And yeah, I'm Pseudo. Cheers, and I'll see you in Tyria.